Greetings and good everything, Nubians. Hello, 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 everyone, non-Nubians as well. Y'all are all welcome. We love you,
Everybody's welcome.
regardless. Hi, Dr. Carr.
Hey, Professor Hunter, how are
Hey,
you? Good
I'm good.
everything. Another wonderful week.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we were having an off mic conversation. I was like,
You
this
know
is so I
that's
mean, we're in community, we were talking about the Essence Festival I had on the show yesterday, which we haven't posted yet on YouTube. A young lady who had a rant on one of the social media platforms about, going to Essence every single year and just feeling really disappointed. She said great swag bag from McDonald's, great music,
I'm
but
loving it.
Louisiana has a voter suppression problem and a voter drive problem, and she said it was a little activation over to the side that people could do, but it wasn't central, and so I brought her on the show to talk about it. But many people will deem our conversations, my conversation, because I lead the way, right,
Yes, you do.
as some sort of dig at Essence. No, it's a dig at us. Like I really want to know, and you brought the Africana framework into play for me. So everything that I do now is through that lens and through that seventh one that we added from Sonia Sanchez's but how do it free us?
No, but how do it free us, right?
We're in a particular point in history where yes, we should have fun, we should have joy, there should be joy, everything. But if we're going to gather in such great numbers with such greatness, because there's some powerhouse women showing up in New Orleans every single year,
Mm-hmm.
what should be the goal, right? And so we can bring into because the one, I think the video that's up now is about how there was a cease and desist, and whether or not the bookstore or the organizers of the event at the bookstore were using Essence's branding or label to bring people in, that they were charging them for something that to me is irrelevant. As much as you're in somebody's town, there's a Black owned bookstore. If you don't have the wherewithal to bring them into your situation and make sure that they can profit from your being there with those thousands of women, at the very least, carve out space for them and be
Mm-hmm.
very clear about, we are visitors in your town, bringing all of this commerce. Yes, it's great. But at the end of the day, what are we walking away with? And I know Vice President Kamala Harris was there, and it was some sort of Black global economic forum. But central, like what is the source? What is this? The foundation of the thing that you're doing. And as a magazine, so I'm gonna say this because I didn't talk about it. So thank you for giving me space. As somebody that really really values the written word, the spoken word, I understand that words are foundational, words become flesh. For somebody to take over a magazine,
Hmm. Hmm.
which foundationally the edict was to empower and bring forth, even though it was four men that came together, convened by Russell Goings to
As you
come and
as you
produce.
explained,
Yeah, I mean, and this is something. So I just want to say this too.
yeah, yeah.
Knowledge is power because it gives you the information to be able to then suss out what your opinion should be on something, right? So
Teach,
I'm not
teach.
talking just because I have an opinion. I sat with Ed Lewis. I sat with Russell Goings. I understand foundationally what Essence was supposed to be because I asked the questions, but also I spent a lot of hours with these men, right? So Susan Taylor, I grew up as a little girl with, reading an Essence magazine and seeing her cornrows and, wanting to have cornrows. And,
How about that? Yes,
in,
yes.
in, in many ways, she was the face, not just the face, the soul of Essence, right? With her
Absolutely.
regal elegance, intelligence. You knew that, right? This woman right now, I think she presided over Cicely Tyson School in East Orange, my hometown. So we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about that. And now somebody took it over. Somebody took over the Source, Vibe, all these magazines for business propositions, not to carry forth the vein and the foundation of what this was about. So I do have a little some like, but I feel like because we don't have momentum of memory, many of us just, we go along because it's fun, but we don't question a challenge. And I feel like in the challenge, we can make people better. It's not to criticize, to tear people down, but to say, understand the foundation of what this is. And we're not accepting just any old thing.
Right. If there's going to be a we that has some function, I
Well,
mean, not as
exactly.
a footnote, maybe not even a conversation we need to get into necessarily, but even as she tried to lead with and intermittently interject that this was not a criticism, that she loved both Megan Thee Stallion and Janelle Monáe.
Oh, you talking about India Irie? I didn't even get it. I never talked about India Irie.
No, well, I'm now, we don't have to talk about it now. I'm just saying that, but in that spirit of trying to have a collective we, do we have space to build a we where we can have a conversation and not immediately be set upon as attacking somebody? India Irie said it from the beginning. She said, hold on. And she said, and not only that, I've lived this. I am in this. I have performed this. So don't take this, but hey, that didn't stop anybody.
No, because everybody has an opinion.
Mm-hmm. And an uninformed one.
No, but this is, sitting with you now 174 classes straight. I think Larry filled in for me a couple of times. You've been here every
No.
But I am better.
Days a week, you probably should be able to. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm much better as a person, but also I realize that we all have kind of this internal call. Like, you should have an internal call, and I think at the forefront of it should be like, before I open my mouth or get my Twitter fingers or whatever the fingers are now, because there's like 80 platforms that people.
We should mention that too today.
All the whether you threading or spouting or whatever you out there doing.
Threads is like they about to have real beef. This is what that beef was a few weeks ago, huh?
Yeah. This
now we find out what it really was about. Yeah,
that's the cease and desist you want to pay attention.
No question. Anyway, whatever you're doing, and of course, Nubia now looking better and better, ain't it? As
well, and let me just say, intentions are everything, right? Mm-hmm. So we created Nubia as a way to be able to stream and have these conversations that we're having now. Folk can chat and talk to each other, because we were being inundated with trolls on the YouTube platform because there's no curation. You can't curate. People who are here with intention. They don't have to agree. People disagree in the chat, but there's a respect at the forefront of everything that we do, and an understanding of what the mission is. And ultimately that question, how do it free us? So we're going to engage in conversation. And if you're not prepared to do that, then you can leave, because, people will leave or be left.
Be left. That's right.
Be left. But, as we have these conversations, they are, every day I'm like reminded, when you brought up Charles Blockson, like, we don't read enough. We don't know enough, but we all have opinions, right? So you're going to go in on an India Irie, been in this game 20 plus years. Her mama, who is really a scholar, a world-class scholar as well. Like, do you know where this woman comes from? She's not talking out of her dingleberries, as most of you are. She not Nubians, I'm not talking about y'all. But she's speaking from a deep love, first of all, of culture, of us, and a deep love of music.
That's right.
And wanting more and better. And why would she get vilified and demonized? It's not about police and bodies. Yeah, we can get into respectability politics, but at some point, are we respectable?
Well, I'm a big fan.
Do we want to be respectable?
I'm a big fan of respectable. I'm a big fan of respectability politics.
Are you?
Absolutely. I think everybody is. Only question is, how do you find respectable?
Okay.
In other words, if you think respectable is doing whatever you want at any time in any place, and presenting in the world the way that you feel comfortable doing in one moment, and if you feel like one moment you want to be out butt naked, and the next moment you want to be out with a burlap sack around your head, that is a form of respectability politics. I think when people say respectability politics, they are assuming we all have a common definition, but the only constant in that is respectability, which is really about, how do I become part of a we? We all have a respectability politics. And when people talk about, well, you're practicing respectability politics, and you're not, is your standard for respectability to just basically say that I want to be unfettered? Well, that's a form of respectability. So, in fact, to me, there's a standard. It's very simple. Ray Winbush brought this up many years ago in his book, The Warrior Method. Our friend and brother Ray Winbush was at Morgan State and done all this stuff on rites of passage, psychologist, worked at Fisk, and then was over Vanderbilt. Ray and I was 22 when I kept Ray's boys as part of the South Street Community Center summer program. That was my first post undergrad teaching work in the summer of 2000. It was summer 1987. Anyway, long story short, Ray Wimbush, when he would go in a classroom and these young brothers would be in there, and he's talking about, how to be a young man and come up. And one thing, we need to stop cussing so much and using the N-word. And one of the young brothers pushed back and say, well, why can't we use the N-word? It's our word. We flipped. He said, no problem. Can I call your mother the N-word? And the little boy want to fight. He said, no, wait, hold on. You said it's a term of endearment, right? Is anybody closer to you than your mother and father? No. Well, then I say your mother, that N-word. Oh, now we're going to fight. Hold on now. Wait, what's the rule? You seem to have a respectability politics. All NDRE is saying, I love all of us. Look, last time I saw NDRE, and I don't know NDRE, but I know Yanni Gregory fairly well. Yanni, at her father's funeral, she, NDRE dropped everything and came to the ritual, and they were standing out there talking, embracing, and she performed. See how much she loved it. NDRE always been about that life of promoting. When you see me, I'm bringing everybody with me. And of course, we know NDRE in part because Stevie Wonder was like, y'all love me? Listen to sister right here. There's a community, and then it gets broken down by gender. Then it gets broken down by class. And why you let these people dictate how we build a we? They ain't never, people talk, Alethea Watkins talks about this all the time. She says, we start about sexual assault and say, that should be a man's issue and a woman's issue. I'm saying, somebody put their hands on my sister, that's my issue, and that's my nephew's issue, that's my brother-in-law's issue, my brother's issue, as well as everybody. When did this become women's issues and men's issues? Are we talking about, how do it free us? How do we measure whether or not our work is serving our purpose? In fact, what is our purpose? Maybe we should have that conversation. What's purpose? I don't know. But anyway, so
I feel like, I never forget how, often I get shocked that the way that I see things is not normal or is not the norm, because I would assume we all are kind of working towards the same goal, but we're not, right? And it's disappointing. I always get my feelings hurt around this, especially when it's people who you assume or who say that this is what they're supposed to be doing, and then you find out behind closed doors it's a completely selfish mission. And this has happened to me on a number of occasions. And unfortunately, I've had the privilege of being in rooms where people let their hair down and they say, because for the large part of my career as a journalist, as big as I am, I was invisible. That pen and pad, it's almost like the mic with reality shows. People say things when you do know that I'm recording all of this here and here, and I'm never going to forget. And now I'm here with a platform, and I haven't forgotten. So when I talk about people, and y'all may say we're throwing shade, because you might accuse Dr. Carr of throwing shade. That's not shade, it's truth. Now you can either digest it and understand that what they should be happy about is that I'm not actually saying all of the things, and I'm just doing a drive-by, just a little tat, because there should be a larger conversation about some of our most favorites, right? And what they talk about us, how they see us when they're in the rooms when no one's watching or they think no one's listening. And there is a kind of another shadow community of folk that don't like us at all, but yet they profit off us. You just got me. Okay, let's talk about Essence for a second. Richelieu Dennis. Let's talk about Shea Moisture. How does Shea Moisture make his money?
Is that a form of respectability politics?
I don't know.
If you can't say what you are saying all the time, if you censor yourself in certain ways, if you present when there's a we one way, and then when you remove from that we and you're exploiting that we, or let me say exploiting, when you're profiting off that we but not willing to be forthcoming, then there's a censorship going on. Yeah. Yeah. And people show up, like the young sister who posted on social media and who we had the conversation with. People show up expecting something because we haven't had a conversation about who we are.
No,
why are you going to Essence looking for Black liberation? Oh, you assume that's what that is. Perhaps you should ask. Because what you said, when Essence started, and I love the way that you talked about that initial step with the younger brothers at that point coming out of finance and junior, and then how very quickly what you see Susan Taylor emerge. And when Essence came out and was published, there was a certain expectation that it engendered. Even John Henry Clark published essays on great black African women rulers. In Essence, LeGrand Clegg talked about the Africanness of ancient Egypt. Essence published articles on the blackness of Tutankhamun in the 70s. You know what I'm saying? So Essence had a standard. You know what I'm saying? Now you come forward to today, it's not the same thing.
Right. Because it's also, again, we keep breaking memory, and that's on the elders. And so if we're now going to be elders, like we cannot, I don't think we can be silent as we watch these things happen and not bring it forth. Like there was a chain that was broken, right? And then somebody took it, you sold this.
It was an external assault. It was an external assault.
Right. And some of it, and there's another question on the horizon too about selling out or selling in, right? So Essence sold to Time Warner for, I think, $2 billion. I remember sitting with Ed Lewis talking about that transition, which was painful to me, because once you hand over the reins, so you're paying $2 billion for what exactly?
Right.
You know, Shea Moisture was sold for $1.6 billion to Unilever. What is Unilever buying?
Come on.
Right? I mean, we can even bring it into Twitter, right? Twitter was purchased for $44 billion by Elon Musk. But how much of Twitter's power came from the black folk on there making it sexy? Because as I'm on all of these platforms right now, just watching, they're struggling because the community hasn't been found yet. There's not enough people on there.
Right.
Folks don't know what to do. You're the first person in. You're looking around. It's like being the first person at a party. The DJ ain't set up yet. You like, okay, is some potato salad? Is some double egg for it? All right, the music. Am I going to dance in the corner by myself? Anybody out there? Like it's weird on all of these places. But Twitter's culture was fomented, I believe, strongly through black folk, through the Arab Spring, through protests. Right. And so if you don't have those magical moments that you cannot go in a lab or in some code and figure out, it's the people. It's the people, Gene. It's always the people. Right. So I'm like, OK, what are you buying for 1.6 billion? What are you buying for 2 billion? BET selling. What are you buying? You're buying us.
Well, you
think you're buying us, but you are. So is it? Ooh. Now that just made me feel some ways just now. Who is it, Dr. Carr? Is it the same damn thing all over again? People purchasing us, commodifying us, selling to us, using us to get rich.
Is there? How? Yes, it is. First of all, and by yes, it is. I would think it is. I'm thinking about it in the longer arc of human social relations, particularly over the last half millennium or so, 500 years or so. The coin of the realm of society, using that phrase kind of tongue in cheek, is labor. And so, you know, our labor was used to build this world system, along with a whole lot of other people. But at the center of it, in the Western Hemisphere, our labor. Fights over our labor became the rationale for the formation of colonies and then countries. We just passed the United States social structure celebrating its birthday, but it really isn't a birthday. It was a fight over our labor. England was contemplating, some in England, not everybody, by the 1830s, they made it a reality, changing its labor relations with African people from enslavement, chattel slavery at the center, to other forms. And that made the 13 of the British North American colonies very nervous. So one of the reasons they had to separate from their parent was because some of them feared that their parent was getting ready to fundamentally renegotiate and change labor relations in the colonies. There were British that said, let's just make those Africans subjects of the crown. And if George Washington don't like it, we'll just get them guns too, and they can keep our colonies going. And you can't go west of the Alleghenies. Why? Because that belongs to the indigenous people. Well, George Washington didn't like that because they wanted to run the whole criminal enterprise from sea to shining sea. They eventually got there. But I'm saying all that to say that now is not then. What has changed? Everything in some ways. The technology has changed. The ability to usurp labor has changed. The Great Resignation is a front page article in today's New York Times about the slowing of people leaving one job, going to another job. Even as people say, well, the economy is doing well. Look at the unemployment rate is going down. Yeah, but the profits, criminal profits, have skyrocketed, and now they're talking about raising interest rates to stop inflation, and people might have to work 2 jobs. It's all a fight over how to gain profit, and the profit that we made with our labor for other people, now the profit is eyeballs. The profit is our attention. And so when Elon Musk purchases a Twitter, he thinks he's purchasing a platform that will help him generate profit, that will give him influence, and that will enable him to move through the world in a way that is much more influential. But in fact, it's much more difficult to retain our attention, as you've been saying now for the past couple of months, focusing in on Stolen Focus, the book Stolen Focus, when the fight is no longer over how much cotton we can pick, how much tobacco we can plant and harvest, but how long we will spend clicking something and looking at something. And so the only other thing I'll say, and this is thinking about this, you know, this is Friday's Financial Times. Threads reaches 30 million signups. Meta touts its challenge to Twitter as a, quote, friendly and wholesome project. Meta said more than 30 million people had signed up to what Mark Zuckerberg pitched as a friendly alternative competitor to Twitter, the social media platform owned by Elon Musk. The app, called Threads, is a text-based conversation app. You can go up to 500 characters, include links, photos, and videos. Of course, the app is dubbed the Twitter killer by some users. And of course, this continues with Facebook, of course, and with Instagram. And I'm saying all that to say just very quickly that the technology has enabled a form of exploitation that is different than even 50 years ago. And so, whereas 50 years ago, 75 years ago, 100 years ago, the parasites would go out to listen to Black musicians in juke joints and nightclubs and other places, and then curate them in to make recordings and profit off them. The Bessie Smiths, the Billie Holidays, you name it. Today, all they have to do with the technology is sit back in their basements, or, you know, paying their low-wage employees to sit and eat lunch and monitor the screens and see what uploaded TikTok video, what uploaded song hits, and then go out and curate it. And now you don't need an A&R department at a record company. And then when you get an inkling that the people may be dissatisfied, like 3 summers ago, when we started our journey on the verge of continued our journey, but really accelerated summer 2020, you then go out and hire a raft of Negroes to be diversity, equity, and inclusion, to give the impression that somehow you're going to make some kind of structural changes, when in fact you never had any intention. You just got scared for a minute that these people might stop paying attention and might actually exact a price. And now that you're past that, we're back to the reality television based, upload everything based exploitation. So when you have a live festival like Essence, does Essence have the influence, Professor Hunter, that it did 20, 30 years ago? Does Essence Magazine have the influence? Because those real life events does any real life event?
Yes and no. You know, the girls trip made Essence, really gave it more cachet, you know, seeing, you know, Jada and Queen Latifah and Tiffany Haddish and Regina Hall, you know, and the girls trip. That was a very, very popular movie. The very next year, you know, Essence, you know, because people are going to get the grapefruit experience, I guess, you know.
And not doing it from unknown brands. In other words, everybody you name, with the exception of Tiffany Haddish, is, and I hate to use this word, but it's one that's been bandied about a lot with regard to movement organizations, legacy brands.
Yes.
When you see Queen Latifah, you're not looking at somebody you don't know. So they're in some ways, yeah, it gives them a boost, but it also introduces them to a generation that did not have the ritual of going to New Orleans for EssenceFest, which is a more kind of respectable version of the Greek picnic in Philadelphia, or the weekend in Virginia Beach that would lead into the fall, or Freaknik in Atlanta. In other words, the convenings that are unpoliced. We're going to talk about respectability politics. Let's talk about respectability politics, because in some ways, when we start talking about class, Essence is very different. Essence is not Martha's Vineyard, where there are a lot of Negroes, some of whom talk the way that you just kind of alluded to when ain't nobody else listening, or they think nobody else is listening, at Martha's Vineyard right now. But Essence was a kind of convergence. You see Frankie Beverly, you could see Patti LaBelle, you could see Stevie Wonder. But now what we see is the influence of a culture that is shot through with this technology that is attempting to continue to attract eyeballs for profits. And so it's a, girls trip. That's very, I'm glad you said girls trip is almost like an inflection point of sorts. You're bringing the momentum of what came before, and you're trying to now usher in some people, but there's no rite of passage.
Right. And I want to not, the reason why I didn't talk about Indy Ivory on purpose, or Janelle Monáe, or Meg Thee Stallion, I saw it all, because those are more simple, whether people's showing their breasts and booties and twerking out, like, it's not something I would do. I wouldn't go to those things. That's me. I'm not going to demonize it either, because that's us, right? It's still all us, and why people are doing it, and Keke Palmer and all of this. That's not even an issue. Those are distractions. And the more we are spending time on that and not on the core issue of, like, what's the purpose of these gatherings? What do we demand that will come forth from these gatherings moving forward? I feel like we abdicate our power in all of these cases, and we just accept everything that's happening, go along, and the hypocrisy, we just walk through it. And in that, I feel like we further it. We make it worse, right? Because we don't challenge it, right? So I'm just asking questions, but I'm also challenging us. Is this who we are? Is this what we want? Is this what you want your children, your girls, your boys to see? Is this it? Is this, because everyone's watching, including your children? Is this us? And then what's the responsibility of the people that put on things? Because I promise you, Dr. Carr, I do a lot of things. I do a lot of things that are even counter to good sense, like having a platform that's not, for the public, that that will never be sold. That's not being built to be sold. You know what I'm saying? I'm not building this for the next round of funding. We're funding it, right? And we're gonna keep this thing going.
Very Carter G. Woodson.
Yeah, but you taught me that, though. I took something.
We taught ourselves that.
No, you dropped the kernel, and I popped it. I was like, okay, let's go. Oh, thank you. Yes, put oil in the pan. What else can we do? And it's inspiring, right? So this is what community should be. I got an idea from you. Somebody, brother hit me in Nubia. It's like, would you do this? I said, would you do this? He gave an idea. I'm like, do it. He's like, I can do that. I was like, yeah, we're all here. Go ahead and do it. Knock yourself out, knock us out with the idea. Let's go. It's like we're all waiting for a savior, but we're the savior, and we have to step into that role. So yes.
If there's us to save,
I think there is, Dr. Carr. You keep saying that, but
but the only reason I say that is because what we're doing is very different, as you say. The clean glass of water metaphor is essential. We're not getting distracted, but we also are aware that when we think about a social structure, that there are organized efforts to achieve objectives. We can't pretend like any of this is random. And so, while we're talking about who's got on clothes, who doesn't have on clothes, and policing each other, that is very much a governance conversation. The governance category in our framework isn't about always being correct. It's about who are we to each other. And this is who we are to each other. And that's playing out in ways that we have to be, if we can, much more attentive to the distinction between the social structures that we find ourselves in and are pulled into and contribute to, quite frankly, and the governance conversations, because governance conversations should lead to institution building. Nubia is an institution. Narrative is an institution. The Nation of Islam is an institution. NAACP is an institution. Essence was an institution. And I'm saying that, it gets blurry when, and this is where branding comes in, as we know, when you take a trope, a label, a concept, and use it for other purposes, and people haven't taken the time to say, is this what it was before? It is absolutely not what it was before. And so when we start talking about, the conversations we're having about, any of the performers, what we do, my question is always, in terms of this African studies framework, we can have that conversation. We have to have it in the government. Now, who are we to other people? And how do we carry ourselves? How do we operate in those spaces that aren't grounded in who we are to each other? I got this copy of November. We talked about it in Office Hours Monday night. The November 2022 issue of Vanity Fair, because it was an article on Queen Mother Moore, which written by Kirsten Mullen, which I read as a deliberate evasion of Queen Mother Moore's commitment to Pan-Africanism. It's really an article trying to recruit Queen Mother Moore, oddly Moore, into this argument about descendants of slaves and all this stuff that I find just unpersuasive. But I bought the article. I bought the issue, not because of the cover article. The cover article is Lizzo. Here's Lizzo. Wait, Lizzo. So I said, okay, well, Lizzo has a beautiful outfit on there. I'm sure somewhere in this big spread that's on here, they're going to show her in various forms of her performing appearance. And here she is again. Okay. And here she is again. Okay. Here she is again. Okay. And here she is again. Okay. What's missing, Professor Hunter?
All her body parts that are exposed.
Yeah, it's Vanity Fair, friends. So when we start
with Dr. Carr, what are you saying? Vanity Fair has a standard?
What I'm saying is, in an Africana studies framework, is who we is to other people and who we are to each other. Vanity Fair
is like, you gonna put some clothes on?
And guess what? Did Lizzo push back? Lizzo went to cover Vanity Fair. I'm sorry, let me not say that, because I don't know Lizzo. I don't know her handlers. I don't know her business. I don't know her enterprise. I know she's big up and making all the money, and God bless her. In the same period in the area.
One more thing. Come on. I hypothesized in my little mind that you can teach people how to treat you. So I said, I'm gonna have this little radio show, and there's gonna be rules of engagement, right? Because I listen to radio. I was a student of radio way before I got on the air. I would drive around because I drove a lot because I'm.
Mute. Last thing we heard was I drive around a lot.
I drive around a lot, so I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh, everybody. I would listen to.
And radio is the one thing that can't be displaced. No technology is ever going to get rid of mouth to ear people listening. So yes, you're a student of that. Yes.
So I know the tricks, right? In radio, I know how to get the phone lines going. I promise you, I could sit there, draw out some topics. It's real easy, by the way.
Yes, ma'am.
Once you know. But I said, I want to do something different. I want to have conversations with people every day. Now, I know that's going to take a while. So fortunately, I'm on a platform that's not Nielsen rated, right? So I don't have to worry about my ratings, algorithms, clicks, etc. I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm doing well in the ratings, as Bomani Jones and others get canceled, as the Black Lady sketch show gets canceled because it's driven by ratings, right? So they can easily say you're not up to, so Stephen A can get on, I'm number one show. So I deserve the money that I'm getting because they're ratings that will inform the higher ups or the people that pay. I don't have ratings. So I had the opportunity, and I was on a channel that nobody cared about per se. Maybe, they might argue, but you show me what you care about by where you put your money. So you tell me you don't have any money, I know you don't care about this channel. So that gave me the opportunity to say, can I build something that is community? That's us, that before I even knew you, can I build an us with my 2,000 followers on Twitter? Can I build an us in this radio space? By having conversations and also demanding of the callers. If you call up, you better have something to say. Don't just going to be flapping your gums, talking and just talking. Next caller, and then maybe I cuss you out. But no, I'm not going to do that. We're going to have conversations. I'm going to demand more from you.
Yes.
Almost 9 years later, Dr. Carr, we now out in them streets. We just came back from Chicago doing a version because, my show Monday through Thursday, Monday, now it's Motivational Monday, Tech Tuesday, Wellness Wednesday, Thrive Thursday, and Foolishness Friday because you need a day to let your hair down because we all need a little teaspoon of sugar.
No question.
Now, Foolishness Friday's out in them streets.
In them streets. I saw the pictures. Good night.
Oh, my God. So, but let me say this about Chicago. First of all, every place we went, they were like, please be safe. Be safe now. I was like, is this city dangerous? Are y'all saying something? I feel okay being here. But in the venue, now we're at the City Winery because we were in DC and Atlanta. They are so impressed with our crowd. Like they keep saying that. Oh my God.
I witnessed that firsthand as they were telling you that when you came to DC, we were there and they could not, which is tragic in a way. Because
I was like, you don't get this kind of crowd? No, they don't, because this crowd doesn't exist any place else. And Lamont was telling me in Chicago, there's the comedy scene is either the really ratchet comedy places in really, sketchy neighborhoods,
sure.
or there's, this, where we're, this highbrow thing. There's no place for us. So in the City Winery is like, oh, you've captured magic in the bottle. People who just want to come. The comedians who had never experienced this audience before were like, I'm not getting heckled. Everybody's paying attention to my jokes. They get my jokes. I have the guy that does the Trump impersonation. He usually performs before a white crowd. Our crowd, we get it, right? So I'm sitting there like, this audience.
No, you did it again.
I'm sorry. No one can find.
No, that's HBO trying to shut you down before they can, because they can't make a pitch to you create the new Def Jam, because that ain't why you in it. So
no,
that's
right.
You down.
To be honest, I said to them, this ain't about comedy. It's about community. It's about people flying in from Texas and California and driving up from Florida, coming in from Detroit to be a part of each other, right? And if we can laugh along the way. So I took the first segment to talk about affirmative action at a comedy show, right? So we had a panel discussion about it and involved the audience. But I was sitting there and I was like so humbled and happy that in my little mind 9 years ago, I imagined this. And today now we have Nubia, that's even more a bigger extension of that. But I imagine that there were a whole lot of people out there that just couldn't find where to be because everything's about market shares and demographics and, this place and that. Everyone's in their little boxes. And if you can't monetize it, right? So Charlemagne, 18 to 30, radio's about the 18 to 34 male, they're about who can buy stuff so that we can now sell to you.
That's
so
right.
I was even like crazy, because this is crazy. What advertisers? I don't rock with you if you, McDonald's first advertiser, Rush Card was the first person trying to come in on the show. I was like, hell no. Hell no. Now it was a lot of money, Dr. Carr, but I was like, nah, we can wait for people that actually are doing something that is valuable. Like this is again demanding of the people. You want to be in relationship with us? Here are the rules of engagement. This is what we demand of you. So you want to take over a legacy magazine? Here's what we demand of you. I buy this. I'm a subscriber. Here's what we demand. We don't demand anything of our politicians, of the people that sell us stuff, but we make brands so successful and nothing to show for it. I'm saying let's stop doing that. And I'm saying it by doing it. So I just needed to say that.
There it is. We're saying stop doing it. And you're saying it by doing it. These are two things that often get commingled. And that's why we engender a sense of frustration, a sense of defeat, because what you're doing and what you've invited us all into doing has been the only thing that has worked for us. And not just the only thing in the last several centuries of this chattel enslavement and the afterlives of enslavement, has worked for us since the beginning, has worked for us, meaning all human beings. You build institutions from the inside out. And what you're demonstrating is, narrative is a subscriber-based entity. But guess what? So is everything else. So when people say, well, you gotta pay to be a narrative, and then Nubia is the social media arm. Okay. So when folks saying we're going to grassroots organize and say, but go on Patreon and or send us some money on YouTube, and you very quickly, as we had conversations, you were saying, the access that people who may not have resources or who are not yet ready to come into, who we don't want necessarily in the space, but they can still have part of the conversations we have regularly in the public space. But you told people very quickly, don't send money on YouTube, because you're basically subsidizing YouTube. So you hustle this. Okay, let's get a platform together where we can now use our resources collectively. If everybody do a little bit, but nobody has to do a lot, And we're not looking for angel investors in the form of corporations or foundations. The president of Ford Foundation, I'm talking about that in a minute, was talking about affirmative action. A black man, Darren Walker, I mean, very important figure. But let's be very clear. This isn't the world of corporate philanthropy, because what they realize is, how do you control a movement? You give it a little money. That's how they got Queen Mother Moore and Vanity Fair, because everybody from the MacArthur Foundation to Ford and Mellon, they giving out money for reparations studies now. What are you doing? Well, we're going to influence y'all. Oh, no, that's not what we're doing. We want to partner. We want to help. No, yeah, just write check, get the hell out of the way. But I'm saying, I like to say that you are not just saying we need these trusted brands, so to speak, to come back to their roots, or to come back. Well, them days is gone. But you're not just saying that we need to continue to fight for that, continue to influence, continue to you're saying, now, while we're doing that, the real work is to build the spaces where we ain't got to go through all that. That's why last week when we, was in Atlanta, just walking them down Sweet Auburn and going over to the King Center and being a bit, going past the funeral home, Cox Funeral Home, cat a corner from Ebenezer, right down the street from Big Bethel AME Church, right down the street from the Prince Hall Masons and the Elks Lodge and the Odd Fellows building, and then across the street from the Atlanta Daily World offices and 100 Black Men of Atlanta. These are institutions that Black people control. And then when the city tried to run a highway through, which they did, but really wanted to obliterate that entire place, Martin Luther King had been killed by then. But guess who stepped up and said, no, we're not going to have that? Coretta Scott King. A lot of people don't know. Coretta was at the center of, no, hold on, Mr. Mayor, the city council. Y'all not going to run a highway through and obliterate Sweet Auburn. You're not going to do that. And who was there shoulder to shoulder with her, lockstep? Her sister-in-law, King Farris, who just made transition after we had talked. No, but come on, I want you just to tie this bow off, Prof, because this is critical. There's a lot of people who are not yet in this space as these people who have made billions, soon trillions, Jeff Bezos and them, off of us, simply say, I don't know you. I don't need to know you. I own Facebook. I bought Instagram. I got these other places. And I'm just going to say, boom, and go live. And then 30 million people come over here. The other wolf, Elon Musk, is like, what the hell? Yeah, because you restricting tweets. And what do? Professor Hunter says, now I'm over here in these other social media platforms because my presence is here. Some of y'all will learn something. I can engage. But I live in Nubia. And this is what I'm known as Karen there. That alone, if I'm Elon Musk, if I'm Mark Zuckerberg, I'm not paying attention to you. But by the time they do, it's too late. Why? And there's nothing you can say to me. This is how we've won every time.
Secretly, Dr. Carr, secretly, I've always won, I guess, and this is my naivete, because I'm wildly optimistic and idealistic. But I always hoped that there was like this secret Avengers group of Black people, dropping, I was always hoping that was the case. And then I realized that it wasn't. I was like, can we create it? Can we create it? And it ain't really a secret. I'm telling you openly, I'm here to dismantle this ish. I am here to do that. Every day I work towards it. That's my goal. You ain't got to ask what's your agenda. My agenda is to dismantle injustice wherever it is. That's my agenda. By any means necessary, we doing it. But I always wish that there, all of these groups, I'm like, I believe maybe, behind closed doors, they're all together. And they're actually all like, you do this, you do that. Shh, don't tell everyone we're together.
That's right.
Nah, they all got their hand out. That's what they're really doing.
Yes,
the Drop Squad. Yes, yes.
Oh, Drop Squad. Yeah, Eric LaSalle. Yeah.
I was hoping that actually existed, but I'm gonna say
Nubia is the Avengers. Casey Glenn said Nubia is the Avengers. Hey, look, and they're going to be critics, but guess what? If we stop to argue with people instead of continuing to pour the clean glass of water, that's on us.
That's it. All right. So, first of all, thank you. I'm obsessed with Charles Blockson, because I'm obsessed with you. So,
I wish you could have. You and Charles Blockson would hit it off. So he was just a regular man. But they haven't set a date for the memorial yet, by the way. As soon as they do, we'll let everybody know. But Blockson was. He's like you, hated pretension. See, anybody that leads with "I'm so and so" and this is what I've done, Mr. Blockson, just sit there.
He's more gracious than I am.
No, you sit there a lot. I mean, you see every day. Yeah. I mean, you see every day. I'm just anyway. So, but yeah, He's
But I bring him up because what it has inspired in me is like the gift of, like, you talk about being a bookophile, and I know there's a lot of Nubians building libraries. I'm seeing your book displays, and it's beautiful. At the same time, I feel like you can get lost in the weeds of all of the damn books. At some point, it's like
everybody don't need to do that.
Exactly, that's my point. Like you don't need 1,000 books. Like I'm buying 2 copies because now, like I'm gonna have a copy that I keep pristine, and one that I dog ear and mark up and things. Also, I have books that I just want people to sign. If I ever see them, like I just bought Gina Yashare's physical copy because I imagine I'm gonna be in London one day or wherever I'm gonna get her to sign my book. But I just, or Dr. Black, I know I'm gonna see him in January, so I bought physical books so he can sign them. But collecting books is more than just your digestion of the content. It's also an honoring of the future, because you're not really collecting books for just yourself, because these books are gonna be here after you're gone. So there's like, I want to spend some time at some point walking through the philosophy behind how we collect, why we collect, what we read, what we don't read. I love that we're in class with you because we don't have to read every book, because you read the books, you've given us breadcrumbs, and I have just enough to talk intelligently about things because you've given us the pathway. So thank you.
Thank you. No, that's my job. And I'm not alone, Prof. That's my job. And I say job in the sense of, you talk about calling. It's very interesting. Coretta Scott King, in her book, My Life with Martin Luther King, and then in her interviews over the years, talked about calling. And she said, people looked at my husband as having a calling, and he did. She said, I too have a calling. We all have callings. And in one conversation that she had, Jonathan Ogg actually recounts this in his book on King, late in the book. Ogg recounts a moment, I think this might have been when the Voting Rights Act was signed. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, and Coretta Scott King could not go to the White House. She had to stay in Atlanta because she had scheduled for Martin III and Dexter to have their tonsils out. I think that was the reason. And it caused a little friction. She said, at that moment, I kind of felt alone. One of the few times I felt alone, because I wanted to go and I couldn't go. And that led I to comb through the archive for one of the interviews of Coretta Scott King, where she and her husband were having a conversation about calling. And Martin King said, I'm called to this work, you're not. And she said, yeah, no, I'm called to it too. Different than you. You're absolutely called. But if my calling was just to be a wife and a mother, then I would go out of my mind. And of course, we know Coretta Scott King in many ways is the one that introduced Martin Luther King to a great deal of the content and conversations and ideas that we attribute to him in terms of his awakening was really her. And he talked, and he often said that. In fact, I'm remembering it now. This is late in the book, maybe around the late 400s and maybe in the early 500s of pages of Ogg's book, where he's trying to claim that Martin Luther King was not a socialist, in contravention of Martin Luther King. I think he uses Tommy Selby at Harvard as a battering ram. It's interesting how Ogg will recruit scholars in to kind of make his points at moments when he really is kind of on unsure footing. But as he told you, you got to sell books, so you can't be running around calling Martin Luther King a socialist. And expect, he had a dream. It's deeply rooted in the American dream, capitalism and every kind of thing. But at any rate, I said all that to say that when we think about how people think about themselves, and we think about how people are presented to us, we come to the dilemma that we have. The dilemma we have as African people is always to, like any other group of human beings, any other individual human beings, to see ourselves, to speak our special truths to the world, and to build community. Over the arc of human existence, groups of humans have been interrupted by other groups of humans trying to realize their human potential. So it's nothing that's unique to people of African descent. What is unique to us as African people is the last half millennia or so, the last 500 years, when that assault human on human assault took the form of race in a very pronounced way. Race didn't start 500 years ago, but certainly its application as a racialization which has African people degraded or attempts to degrade us, to make us, render us as somehow however you want to define human, that's when it really intensified. And so we have to build now out of the strengths that allowed us to endure this. This is why Dan Black's work is so important. He gives us these renderings of how we've done that, and the challenges still remain in a fictional form, but drawn from historical memory. And as we're doing that, we have to never displace the fact that it will benefit everybody. So we're not just doing this for quote unquote Black people. We're doing it for humanity, but it's going to require some investment of our most precious resources, the most precious of which, of course, is time and space. Our time, when we come together regularly, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day in Narrative and Nubia, and in terms of these convenings, regularly every day in Nubia. And then for those who are not in that space, who are experiencing this outside of the space, if you're on YouTube or it's been reposted somewhere, that is the work that allows us to begin to engender some sense of commitment. What can I do? What will I do? What must I do to contribute to this collective work? And this work is literally constructing, reconstructing, strengthening, extending, creating spaces where we can fulfill our full humanity, be human in the world in ways that benefit ourselves and each other. A vestige of that, an example of that, an instance of that, a brother that you talked to, Prof, Hilton George, and this whole question of BlurredCon that we all gonna be at, at 1 o'clock Saturday. Well, we're gonna be over there. You're gonna be leading us in a conversation. Brother Kevin Strait, Dr. Strait, who's down at the Smithsonian, who is the brother who is responsible for mounting the Afrofuturism exhibit. Of course, shows you how many times this catalog, Afrofuturism, the history of Black futures. It's on display at the museum. Dr. Strait will be there tomorrow. Brother Kevin, our sister, Nubian, institution builders, serial institution builder, inheritor of healing and teaching institutions, who now has convened and extended that tradition in the form of many different platforms and ventures, including Calabash, Tea and Tonic. Dr. Amin, Sunyata Amin will be there. I'll be there. I'll be coming over from the ritual that we have. We're going to have the memorial ritual at Crampton Auditorium on I think it's 10:15, 11 o'clock. They're going to have a ritual. I'm going to give a few remarks, and then just as one of many paying tribute to Dr. Spriggs, Bill Spriggs, and I'm coming over to BlurredCon. I might go before that, actually. But at any rate, that whole notion, and of course, the topic of our panel at 1 o'clock is Afrofuturism and the future of Black creativity. But the whole concept of BlurredCon, as Brother Uraeus, who has kind of really led us and introduced us and sparked those who have a similar orientation and interest and commitment in the world of Black creatives in general and Afrofuturists in particular. Of course, Black Heroes Matter. Brother Jason Wise, as Brother Uraeus and all his creative work kind of inspires us and reminds us we're talking about building future worlds anchored very deeply in memory, the momentum of memory. That's really what Afrofuturism is. Shout out, by the way, to my friend and brother Ronaldo Anderson at Temple University. He is one of the people who contributed to the Smithsonian exhibit. This is the brand new edition of the Black Scholar, one of the oldest institutional publications among Black academics, volume 53, number 2. This whole issue is called The Shape of Things to Come, Africology and the Rise of Afrofuturist Studies. It just came out. And, it's the academics talking to each other, and it's important work. But at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is institution building. How do it free us? And what is our objective? How do we measure those objectives? Last week, I was in Atlanta, as I said, in office hours, as we talked about on Monday night. And by the way, that office hours, again, was transformative. As always, Monday nights are those couple of hours we spend. Shout out to everybody who came in and the kind of pushing conversations that we had about, how we channel our hopes, our fears, our rage, how we grapple with this question of being Black in the world, how we displace the impulse sometimes to murder everything moving, and use that and channel that into the type of transformative energy that we are absolutely committed to doing. Again, the first commitment of resources is time and space. But in that conversation on last Monday night, the night before the July 4th rituals that we see here in the United States, for those who are not in the United States, I mentioned, and I'll mention here to everybody else who may not have been there Monday night, I was in Atlanta, and we went by Madu bookstore, Mama Nia Damali, one of our long distance runners and freedom fighters. If I have a copy of her, let me see, because she, nope, I was hoping I might have it somewhere near, but I don't think I do. Yeah, no. Nia Damali, who has been in business for decades, partner, intellectual, comrade with folk like Jim Alexander, the great photographer, Asa Grant Hilliard, the great educator, the great historian, Larry Obadeli Williams. They published a gloss of the Book of Tahotep many years ago, and I was looking for, she gave me the latest edition of her book, Names for African People. She shared them with us. And anyway, Mama Nia, we came in, and as I said on Monday night, she was like, Nubians coming here all the time. People who listen to In Class coming here all the time. Back in Kwanzaa season, they came and got their Kwanzaa gifts. We were talking about all those children's books that I was at Sankofa books, and I was showing y'all some of the things I had picked up. And she said I had to order a rack of those, and I couldn't keep them on the shelves. They kept flying out. This is a sister who, when you buy a book at Medu, when you buy a book at Sankofa, when you buy a book in Baltimore at Everyone's Place, when you go into Narrative and look at the bookstore list and you subsidize those bookstores with your resources, your time, sure, it takes time to go into a bookstore, your space, you got to go to a bookstore if you're not going to order online, but also those financial resources. That money doesn't just keep the doors open on those bookstores. That money allows those bookstores to do their primary work, which is what? Not to sell all the books in the world to all the people and everybody got to buy all the books. No, when we walked in last Saturday, there was a sister there who had just finished a book signing. And she sold several hundred copies of her book, sitting there in the mall in Atlanta, set up in front of the storefront that is Medu bookstore. And she was just packing up what was left, which wasn't much at all. When you write a children's book, this is why when Dan Black talks about folks showing up in DC or New Orleans, and by the way, Dan Black, of course, has had book signings at Baldwin and Company in New Orleans. When Dan Black talks about going to Chicago, and then, of course, a few weeks later, here comes, my King, Karen Hunter, Brother Dante, the whole crew with Foolishness Friday, subsidizing not only Black businesses, but allowing us to convene in space, time and space. What we're really doing is building community. Bookstores are community centers. And the bookstores that did that have always been centers for us not only to buy books, but to meet each other. So Maya Angelou, Malcolm X, Carlos Moore, all in and out of Michaud's bookstore on 125th Street. Mr. Bloxon, meeting them because he had a track meet in New York and then went uptown to Harlem, was haunting the bookstores on Book Row in Lower Manhattan, then goes up there. And Mr. Michaud pulls him into the back room. Charles Bloxon is literally created and curated in some ways by these meetings. And a lot of this happens at bookstores. When I first met Paul Lee in Detroit, I was at Vaughn's bookstore in between sessions at our Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations conference. I was at Vaughn's bookstore. And I was going in, Paul Lee was coming out. He saw me coming in. He didn't know me. I didn't know him. But something about our energy, I guess. Vaughn's bookstore, the oldest Black bookstore in Michigan. Ed Vaughn, State Representative Ed Vaughn, who was a bookseller long before he was a state senator, who had just, in fact, given remarks at the conference, So we didn't know each other, me and Paul. I'm going in, he's coming out, and Paul, as far as I'm concerned, the finest historian of Malcolm X we have, finest living historian of Malcolm X we have. Paul, saw me, and I guess we struck up a conversation right out front, and he pulled out his coat pocket a picture, one of them postcards with Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, and Louis Michaud, Mr. Michaud in the middle. And he said, "You know who that little dude is?" I said, "Yeah, it's Mr. Michaud." He said, "Oh, okay, you know who that is." I mean, just like Charles Bloxton asked me about Hubert Henry Harrison when he said, "What you know about Hubert Henry?" And we struck it out, been friends ever since. And so I'm bringing all that up to say that the places where people meet to buy books are not just bookstores. They are places where people convene to discuss, to debate, to build, to create. And what we have in Nubia is a virtual version of that now extends into real world places like Sankofa and Medu, into real world places like Everyone's Place, and into real world places like City Winery and places like that, because that Nubia energy also feeds into the larger universe that you convene, Prof, beyond, that was convened before, that Nubian narrative add on to, that extend on to, from Sirius and all the other ventures. And so, we were there, and that's when you see the other side. This is where I want to go to with this just for a few minutes today. Pouring those clean glasses of water in a moment when we can confuse what's going on in the world with the main thing we should be concerned about. I'm thinking now about the affirmative action conversation that we had last week. And remember, because we had to go a couple of days early, the SFFA case had just been released, but we hadn't yet had, as we talked about, the other major targets of this term of the John Roberts Court. And that was namely the exquisitely absurd ruling on a thought exercise. That would be 303 versus creative, as Angie Porter has been telling us. The whole idea that I'm gonna start a business, and if I start a business and the gay person comes in and wants to, I don't want to do that. Do I have to do it? Okay, we'll take that case as a thought exercise. No, wait a minute, did it happen? No, wait, you ruled on a hypothetical. Well, is there a precedent for you ruling on it? So
not just a hypothetical, Dr. Carr, a hypothetical on a person that the man that they claim wasn't gay, I mean, it wasn't even on a fact.
No question.
It was just a hypothetical. They presented evidence based on a lie. Ruled in favor of the lie.
In favor of the lie. Absolutely. Isn't that something? Couldn't even wait for the thing to happen, because you would have had to find somebody. So they wouldn't even risk that you wouldn't find anybody who would do it. They just said, and it's interesting because I'm sure there are people who would say, well, you all must have missed something. But let me be very clear. You don't have to go to law school. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a law professor. You don't have to be a legal professional to understand that, no, you're not missing anything. My friend and sister, Sherilyn Eiffel, who's joining the Howard faculty at the law school in the fall. Sherilyn was on social media like, no, y'all didn't miss nothing. What you just said, Prof. Hunter, that's exactly right. You literally took a side of the lie, and none of this ever happened. But in many ways, that affirmative action, as you and Angie were talking about the signal it sends, and we talked about this a little bit before on Monday night too, but as you all talked about the signal this sends to employers, to people who are hiring everything from interns to entry-level jobs to boardroom access, all this kind of, that is the biggest threat of this affirmative action thing in some ways. But the real money fights that this court wanted to get at was that First Amendment fight for religious and maybe racial or anything else intolerance that the 303 case represents. And already you're seeing people say, well, now I'm not going to serve Trump supporters, or well, now I'm not going to serve. See, this is the unraveling of this funky criminal enterprise. But hey, nobody said that it wasn't going to be, it was going to be without pain. What's going to happen? See, when you get to a certain point and the thing unravels, this is going to be what it's going to be. And then, of course, the other case was them closing off an avenue to forgiving student loans. These are the money cases they were after. Affirmative action, sure, but really, the student loan decision, where they blocked the Biden administration from forgiving student loans by interpreting the statute that they used to do it, the HEROES Act, as not enabling the executive to be able to do that. And of course, there are other ways that Biden can do this. I mean, in other words, this ain't the end of the road for all the people who are in this space right now who were like, oh man, I got some relief. Wait, what? And then, of course, the First Amendment case, the real money one, the 303 creative versus the Lennis. But are these distractions? No, they're not distractions. We have to fight these fights. That's why you vote to get judges that won't do this. There are other things that are being planted now, and I'll talk about those in a minute, that really show us that we have to be engaged in the political process. But you don't wait while you're doing that. You don't wait to build your institutional base. You don't wait to do that. That's very important. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of activity building our base exists beyond the attention of or the awareness of these social structures. So even standing in Medu on Saturday with Mama Nia, you know, one of the reasons we went over there is because Charles Finch III has a new book out, Nile Valley Civilization, a 10,000-year history. You know, he came out in November 2022. This is the book. Charles Finch is like a legend in the African-centered community. Medical doctor, many years, faculty, Morehouse School of Medicine, a deep student of ancient Egypt for many years, correspondent with Sheikh Anta Diop, Theophilo Benga, contemporary of Jacob Carruthers, and so many others. Asa Hilliard, Larry Williams, Obadeli Williams. And so this is his latest book. Mama Nia had them. You know, walk on Barnes Nobles and Amazon and get them necessarily. If you go on Amazon, I haven't looked on Amazon. Why would I? I'm going to the place where the Black people sell the books by the Black authors and published by Black presses, right? And as we are building institutions, the question, as I said before, becomes what are our objectives and how do we measure whether or not our work has served those objectives, have served those purposes. So let's just spend a couple of minutes today, since the last time we were together here, we hadn't talked about affirmative action a lot more because the case had just come out. We're not going to talk about it a lot right now because we've been kind of talked about it, but I want to just raise a couple of things. Like on Monday night in office hours, those of you in Nubia, we applied our Africana Studies framework to this question of affirmative action. And I want to just raise a couple of things. In the Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard and versus University of North Carolina. And of course, that's a misleading title. This is Ed Bloom, the billionaire, getting a beard as a battering ram, trying to put this on Asian Americans to kind of knock down and destroy affirmative action in higher education. And he was able to do that, of course. Mission accomplished. The social structure question we have to ask ourselves is, you know, who are African people to other people? Who are African people in the social structures we find ourselves in? And we know that this is a social structure, a global social structure. We see what's going on in France right now. We talked about that on Monday night. You know, a 17-year-old boy from Algeria is killed by the police, and people in France are like, bet it's on. And they're in the streets right now. Paris is burning for different reasons, as somebody said in Nubia on Monday night. But here in the United States, Blackness continues to be despised in many ways. The shootings continue, the killings continue. And people say, well, you know, Black people are killing Black people. Yes, we saw the violence over the so-called holiday weekend in places like Philadelphia. I talked with my Freedom School students about that on Wednesday when we were together for our regular Mbangi. But we also understand that this is because Black life has been devalued, even Black on Black violence. At the heart of it is anti-Black attitudes. This is what Amos Wilson wrote about in his book, Black on Black Violence in Service of White Domination. It is that self-hatred projected outwardly. But when we start talking about affirmative action in higher education, we should pause and ask ourselves, what are we talking about and how do it free us? In the Financial Times on Thursday, there was an article by Edward Luce, not Bloom, the billionaire, Edward Luce, journalist, Financial Times. And he talks about, the name of the article was, the title of the article, the opinion article, was The Moral Bankruptcy of Ivy League America. What does that mean? Just run a few numbers right now. Luce notes that in the United States of America, there are about 31 million people between who are age-wise between the ages of 18 and 24. 31 million people. 31 million people. Of those 31 million people, about 12 million of them will see some form of post-secondary education. Community college, training programs, what do you want to say, undergraduate school. So 12 million of 31 million will go to school somewhere after high school. Of that 31 million, 19 million will not go past high school if they get to high school. Let's pause and think about that. 19 million will, if they finish, go no further than high school. 12 million will do some form of post-secondary education. That means they'll finish, but they'll start some form of post-secondary education. All the Ivy League schools, shout out to the state of New York, we see has introduced some legislation to ban special admissions in New York schools. How many of those Ivy League schools are in New York? First, I'm trying to think. I think there are two, right? Columbia and Cornell.
Yes, upstate. Yep, that's it.
Yeah, there's a sister from Brooklyn in the assembly and a dude from Brooklyn in the Senate side who co-introduced this legislation to ban legacy admissions. Oh, could be problematic. I read the complaint, not the complaint. Yeah, I guess it is a complaint. The Chica Project, the African Community Economic Development of New England, and the Greater Boston Latino Network filed this week a complaint with the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Education under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 versus the president and fellows of Harvard College. And as we talked about on Monday night, the new president of Harvard College as of July 1st, Dr. Gay, is a woman of African descent. You see, how do it free us? Diversity, equity, inclusion. You can make the president black while you're trying to get rid of black people as undergraduate. Again, this idea, but 31 million between 18 and 24. 12 million going to do some form of post-secondary education. 19 million, they're going to stop at high school if they get to high school. The Ivy League together, collectively, 68,000 undergraduate students at the Ivy League. This is what Luce writes in the Financial Times. He says, whatever tweaks the Ivy League has to make to keep its diversity ratios after last week's ruling are thus largely irrelevant to the 99.8% that will never get there. How do it free us? Does that mean we shouldn't fight to get people admitted to Harvard of African descent? No, it doesn't mean we shouldn't fight to do that, but we should put it in perspective. And we should put that in perspective in a way that helps us understand what's at stake and what we can do by pouring these clean glasses of water. I'm going to read a couple of things from the civil rights complaint that was filed by those organizations I just mentioned. Of the white students admitted to undergraduate study at Harvard, only about half received no preference. Of those white kids, 13% received a donor preference. Shout out to Jared Kushner, daddy, who gave out that money. And 20% received a legacy preference, meaning somebody in their family went to Harvard before them, so they get a leg up for that. The lawsuit says that 70% of those who get legacy and or donor preference are white. So basically, legacy and donor is serving as a racially restrictive admissions criteria. Now, who knows whether they will succeed in a court of law, but they're at least doing it, because the whole conversation this last week has been about privilege. What Luce is saying is, y'all talking about something you ain't gonna be part of. In the introduction to Africana Studies class that we teach in the summer, which started last week, was talking to those students yesterday. Myself, Dr. Mario Beatty, Dr. Blethia Watkins, Dr. Josh Myers, we team teach that class, and a student raised the question on, affirmative action and what it means. And I said, let's be very clear. All of you all in this class, which is a very special class we have curated for entering students who are in the sciences in a specific program at Howard. So y'all could have gone a whole lot of places. You chose to go here. You got a full ride here. It's going to lead to graduate school, professional school, all this kind of thing. And I'm sure that for some of you all, at least, sitting around the family dinner table, or wherever you sit around when you make these kind of decisions about where you're going to go to college, you were told, if you're not going to go to Columbia, if you're not going to go to Harvard or Yale or NYU, if you're not going to go to the University of Chicago or Stanford, if you're not going to go to Cal Berkeley or the University of Texas, Austin, if you're not going to go to Duke or the University of North Carolina, if you're not going to go to the University of Alabama or Cornell, if you're not going to go to the University of Pennsylvania or Ohio State, there are 3 Negro colleges that we will approve at this table: Morehouse, Howard, and Spelman. There are some chuckles. If you had told your mama that you wanted to go to Tennessee State, where I went to school, see, class playing a role in this too. And then we talked a little bit about what I'm about to talk about. At Harvard, 20% of the white kids let in got legacy preference, and 13% or so got a donor preference. And of all the white students admitted, only about half received no preference for them at all. So it doesn't take any math to know that 33%, which is donor and legacy combined, doesn't add up to half. So there are other factors at play. And Harvard didn't want to tell nobody the special sauce about how they let people in. Talked about those interlocking rooms a minute ago, Professor Hunter. But let's look at the contrast. By contrast, only approximately 2% of Black applicants received a donor preference, and under 5% received a legacy preference. For Latinx applicants, about 4% got donor preference and 7% legacy preference. Asian Americans, only 5% and 6% respectively, donor and legacy preference. I'm raising all this not to get too deep into the weeds of legacy and donor and what's going on in the Ivy League and Harvard and Penn and Cornell and Dartmouth and Brown and all those schools. What I'm saying is, this don't matter to 99.8% of the people who are going to college, and the majority of people who are 18, 24 in the United States of America ain't going to college, but everybody can come here. What are you paying for when you go to the Ivy League? What are you getting a scholarship to go to the Ivy League for? The same thing you're trying to get at Howard, at Morehouse, at Spelman, which is access to the network. Now at the HBCUs, the idea, like the Essence Festival, is that you're doing that in order to uplift the race. But are you uplifting the race if you're only uplifting yourself and your family and donating to some scholarship funds from time to time for needy people like you were at one point, maybe 2 or 3 generations back, or maybe even your generation? Are you doing that when you volunteer to go read and go do some after school work and this kind of thing, and then take a picture on Mark Zuckerberg's Instagram and post it saying you're doing service? I mean, is that really how do it free us? Now, you are giving young people something to aspire to. That's that whole role model thing. Right. But if they're pulling up the ladder, thanks Clarence, to Yale, you're having students aspire to go to a place that may be increasingly difficult to get in, and to perhaps look down through their nose at these other places. Are you really engendering in them the type of ways of knowing, the types of cultural meaning making that will allow us to move collectively? Because there are 2 ways to respond to that kind of thing. We talked about this a little bit last week too, so I'm just going to mention it in passing. If you want to go back into it, you can go back last week when we were talking about Randy Matori's book, Stigma and Culture. You can create a feeling among people who may never have access to a place like that, that they not only don't want access to like that, they don't trust anybody who does have access to that. That's the class tension in the Black community. We don't make it any better by acting like we got contempt for them people who are in the quote unquote lower class, what James Turner would call the laboring class. That's one reaction. The other reaction is you set them on a hamster wheel to continue to aspire to this notion of excellence, that no matter what they say about what they feel about their cultures and their people, their secret aspiration, which is revealed to be not so secret when, it kind of comes to it, is recognition from them other people. Now, the point is this. When Luce says that 99.8% of the people is irrelevant to this Ivy League battle over front action, he then says the genuinely radical Ivy League option, spending their vast endowments to sharply increase student numbers, is unlikely to be entertained. The key to the Ivy League is exclusivity. They don't want everybody at the Ivy League. They don't want everybody at the universities. Otherwise, you wouldn't brag every 5 minutes. Oh, this class is the most exclusive ever. We had 100 billion Negroes apply. We only let in 3. And their GPAs were 8.8 and they on a 4.0 scale. And they busted out the SAT. They scored even more than perfect. In fact, they rewrote the SAT with their answers. We're so proud. Let's cheer. High school graduate Greg Carr then has contempt for the Negro colleges that act that way. Because at least when I came along, they had open enrollment. Did you graduate? What? Are you alive? What? You got $5 for the application fee? Yeah. Whomsoever, let them come. Ooh. Well, that's beautiful. Because the idea is you want to create access, or you can create spaces like the spaces we have, where you ain't never got to buy a book. You ain't never got to do that. But you can come in this space, listen, write something down, connect with somebody, come up with an idea. And then gradually, if you want to bring something else in to read or study and share, that's what we do across every day in all this space. And yeah, it costs a little bit of money. Why? Because something's got to keep the lights on. Something got to pay the servers. Somebody got to keep this whole thing operating. Now, that's that Carter G. Woodson model. That's that Association for the Study of Negro Life and History model. And then as it continues to grow and it's growing, here come not what we're from the Blank Foundation. We'd like to no. Well, yeah, because we are subsidizing ourselves. And what Luce writes in the Financial Times, he says the generally radical Ivy League option, spending their vast endowments to sharply increase student numbers, is unlikely to be entertained. Why? Luce says the key to the Ivy League is exclusivity. A big expansion in intake would dilute that premium. If everybody could get access to Harvard, remember they tried this stuff with Harvard and Columbia and Coursera and these huge courses you could get credit for. Yeah, well, guess what? We got the platform for that. Say less. Say less. At this point, Luce writes and says, we are thus likely to continue with the situation in which universities such as Harvard, with a $53 billion endowment, or Princeton, with $36 billion, continue to get richer. Each of these fortunes could revolutionize financial aid at dozens of public universities. There was an excellent series of essays in the New York Times in the opinion page, How to Fix College Admissions Now. My friend Natasha Waraku, who is at Tufts University, wrote one on moving on from meritocracy. Because again, what do you do when you have a space where whoever has a little bit of time, a little bit of resources and space comes into the space collectively and opens it up intergenerationally? That means everybody can learn. Take as much as you can, give as much as you can, exchange. We grow, we institution build. That, you know what the merit is there? I'm human. Our respectability politics is we respect all human beings. That's a form of respectability politics. People say, well, you're not using it correctly. No, you're thinking through a social structure lens. And I just simply refuse to do that. I'm sorry. Not going to do it. Going to do it. Been free range Negro too long. I can't go back down in that plantation straitjacket. Now, there's another essay in there. There are 4 or 5 essays in there, which I think is very interesting. Derek Hamilton, good brother, and Demond Drummer wrote an article talking about HBCUs. Says shower money on HBCUs. Their thing was you should send so much money through the federal government, other sources to HBCUs, state government, federal government. They mentioned the state of Maryland settling for almost $600 million with the public HBCUs there for all the underfunding. The Tennessee case where Tennessee State says, here's the bill for what you shortchanged us that you owed us by federal law. What they say is, if you do that, you can ramp up the number of people who have access to HBCUs. It's one of the reparations arguments as well, even though they say it is not reparations. In fact, there's a line in there where they say that Xavier, they talk about Xavier in Louisiana, which has about 3,400 students, and sends all these students to medical school, consistently leading the nation in producing Black college graduates who go on to complete medical school. 13% or so of the population of the United States of America is of African descent as defined by the census, although I'm counting a lot of Blacks who speak Spanish and French. But anyway, I'm going to do that. Fewer than 6% of the nation's medical doctors are Black. And when you then think about the Black people in medical school, if you took out Howard, if you took out Morehouse School of Medicine, if you took out Meharry Medical College, oh my God, would those numbers crater. But when you go to the undergraduate level, and you see all the undergrads go to Xavier, they go to Howard, they go to Spelman, they go to Morehouse, they go to Tennessee State, which now has a Levi Watkins program where they will have a student come in as a freshman and then go on to Meharry Medical College as a doctor. So you're admitted at 18 years old, they got a white coat ceremony, which blows my mind. My point is, if you take them out, that number craters still. They write in the same city, Tulane, in the same city, New Orleans, Tulane is sitting on a $2 billion endowment, more than 10 times Xavier's endowment size. Imagine how much more Xavier could accomplish if its endowment of 178 million grew to 2 billion. People say that means you got to give to black colleges. Yes, and while you're giving to black colleges, subscribe to Narrative. Why? Because you ain't got to wait to go to college to get an education that is the same or superior, quite frankly, to much of what you get in college. People say, oh, so that's like a masterclass. No, it's not like masterclass. Masterclass is a series of interviews with famous people, and it's good. You can learn, be inspired. But here you can actually get nuts and bolt education. You understand what I'm saying? So the affirmative action conversation, I think, gives us the opportunity to remember the lesson. The lesson is that while we are forcing the state, while we are forcing institutions in the social structure to do right, and that means organizing, that means continuing to fight relentlessly, we are also in the governance formation, institution building, because the institution building allows us to do what we need to do. So I want to end today by focusing for a few minutes on a life that I think we'll probably spend some more time on as we progress. As I said, when we were together last week live, it was the day before the news was announced in Atlanta, and I was so happy to spend Wednesday, last Wednesday, at the Martin Luther King Center, and went back Thursday after I heard the news, quite frankly. Spend Wednesday with my Freedom School students virtually in Philadelphia, in Detroit, in Camden, New Jersey, and in Memphis. And being there when students and young people from all over the country were touring the King Center, and then they were walking by as I was going through our time we're reading this book this summer, State on Freedom, The Long History of Black Power Through One Family's Journey. The story of Zahara and Michael Simmons, who met while they were members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So I was literally there at the old SNCC building headquarters just off the campus of Atlanta University. Well, not Atlanta University anymore. I'm rocking my Atlanta. I got me an AU shirt. I love these Atlanta University shirts. Shout out to Paul Coates, a graduate of Atlanta University School of Library Science, now Clark Atlanta University. They merged in 1989, but I was, able to be there. And so we're talking about this book and these places in Atlanta with these students from, these four cities. And at the same time, we're there having this conversation. And so that was Wednesday. The next day, as we talked about the affirmative action case, then the news came down later that Willie Christine King Farris, at 95 years of age, made transition. The oldest sibling and last living sibling and last link of that generation of the family of Martin Luther King Sr., A.D. King, their parents, Martin Luther King Sr., and Christine, what was her mother's name? Christine Williams. No, Christine is the daughter, Alberta Williams. And she made transition, Dr. Ferris, 95 years old. She served on the faculty. That's why I want to spend just a couple of minutes today. She served on the faculty of Spelman College for almost 50 years. They say 48 in the official announcements about her transition. In her book, Through It All, and in her interview, she says 49. She's a graduate of, in fact, if you get a chance, get your hands on this book, Through It All, Reflections on My Life, My Family, and My Faith, Christine King Farris. She wrote a number of things, children's books about her brother. She was the director of the Learning Resources Center at Spelman College. Got a short chapter in here, chapter 6, My College Teaching Career. And I just want to read something from her. She says, I began my teaching career at Spelman College in the fall of 1958. She was a graduate of Spelman College. She and her brother, she and Martin Luther King, graduated the same year. He from Morehouse, she from Spelman. He was 16 months younger than her. But remember, Benjamin Mays lowered the admission age. Benjamin Mays and the board at Morehouse lowered the admission age at Morehouse, in part to keep them boys out of World War II. And Martin King was able to go to go to Morehouse at a younger age. And plus, he had been skipped a grade. She said, I began my teaching career at Spelman College in the fall of 1958. I love this place and all that it stands for. I love and cherish it for all that it means to me and to countless thousands of other alumni. What a measurable difference this venerable institution has made in my own life, as well as in the lives of young women from literally all across the globe. Spelman is indeed a remarkable institution. She writes, I was hired as the director of the freshman reading program. I'm going to pause there for a minute. I wish I had gotten a chance to meet and sit with, just be around Christine King Farris, Willie Christine. My brother Martin, somebody said my brother Martin is one of my favorites. Yes, booked. What to take with me on vacation. I know Yoli said every time that a car, someone in the chat mentions a book that I have, I keep changing my mind about what to take with me on vacation. I'm gonna tell you one of the most harrowing things in my life when I leave this house is what books to put in my bag. Especially when I gotta leave town. I don't know what, sometimes I can't choose. And I'm not an ebook reader. I know it's a very valuable thing. I have some ebooks, I need them sometimes, but I have a problem when I do. And we're going to talk about that when we do the, she was, love her hats. Yeah, Michelle, love Christine Farris. She was awesome. Love her hats. She got a picture in here. Let me see if I can find it quick, because she got a lot of family photographs in here. And she's got a picture in here where she's got one of those hats on, but she's younger. She said, I love these hats since I was little. Let me see. There go her wedding pictures with Isaac Ferris Sr., working for the Atlanta Daily World. When they met, they were married for a number of years. There's her graduation pictures. I'm going to resist the urge to AD. She said, the King siblings as teenagers, my brother ML, me, and our baby brother AD. Even then, I had a thing for stylish hats. She good for wearing them hats, no question. But let me finish reading what I was reading there from her college teaching career, because for all those years, 13, 14 years that we did freshman seminar, I know what it's like when the students first come to a place and you get the first opportunity to ground them in deep intellectual work. I don't trust a whole lot of places that do that kind of work, and I trust a whole lot of places that do that work. But the criteria for me, the discerning characteristic when you start talking about freshman programs at HBCUs is, are you deeply connecting these young people to the momentum, the long arc of momentum of HBCU culture in terms of education, not just educational excellence, but intellectual work? There's a difference. I'm not talking about diversity, equity, inclusion programs and what opportunities you have to network and internship and what opportunities you have to be in the room with people who can get you a high paying job once you graduate or get you a paid summer internship. That's what they're doing at Harvard and Yale and stuff. That's what they're fighting over in terms of access to affirmative action. I'm not talking about DEIU. I'm talking about HBCU. I'm talking about the intellectual thrust that has been virtually vacated, almost vacated. The majority of students who go to Harvard do not major in the vocational areas. The majority, a plurality of students who graduate, who enter freshmen at Harvard College, are majoring in the humanities and the social sciences. Yeah. But anyway, they can afford, many of them, to do that because now they're in the network. So they're going to inherit the world. The striving classes, the deeper down you go in the class structure, I'm going to school to get a craft, to get a skill, and I don't even necessarily need to go to school to get a skill. This is the tension. So when you are a fresh person, when you're a fresh woman, a fresh man, a fresh person, when you come into a college, an HBCU, you should be grounded as a first day, first week, first month, first semester freshman, fresh woman, fresh person in the long arc of the intellectual work of African people. And that intellectual work begins at the origin of humanity. We took freshman seminar very seriously rather. But now all of that experience is now in this space. That's what we're continuing to build together, because again, we're jailbreaking it. Affirmative action has no place in narrative in Nubia, in these larger valences of collective work, which is driven by our common humanity and anchored in this question of Africana. Affirmative action don't cut no ice here. It is irrelevant. It ain't 99.8% irrelevant. It's 100% irrelevant. Even as we continue to fight to get access to these places, we will not center them as the center of our aspiration, because all that's going to do is reinforce the idea of our miserable worthlessness. It may not look like that at first, but ask some Negroes who are going into debt to go to those places. All right. She says, I was hired as the director of the freshman reading program. The program was funded by a grant from the Eli Lilly Foundation. Lilly simultaneously funded similar programs at the other member schools of the Atlanta University Center, Clark College, Morse Brown College, and Atlanta University. By the way, Christine and her siblings went to the Atlanta University lab school. A lot of HBCUs had elementary, junior high, now middle, high schools especially on campus. But the Atlanta University lab school, high school closed. And so they transferred over to Booker Taliaferro Washington High School, Booker T. Washington High School. I was sitting with Baba Mariba Kelsey this weekend having a conversation with him, and I asked him if he knew Charles Harper, who was the principal of Booker T. Washington High School. Charles Harper lived right up the block from where Willie Christine, A.D., and Martin Luther King were raised, right there on Auburn Avenue. Their house is still there, run by the National Park Service. And the principal of Booker T. Washington's house is still there. Several houses up the block, same side of the street, Harper. Dr. Kelsey said, know him. He was the principal when I went, because he's from the Pittsburgh district of Atlanta and Black community. And Dr. Kelsey, the principal at Booker T. Washington High School, was at the Harper. There's a Harper school in Atlanta now, but I would encourage y'all to look up Harper. Harper was the first president of the Georgia Teachers and Educators Association, the Black teachers organization that fought for equal pay, that fought for all these things. Martin Luther King Sr. was part of that fight. Ultimately, the subsequent president of the association was the great Horace Tate. And in fact, I should probably stop here to mention the transition a couple of days ago of Marvin Arrington Sr. Marvin Arrington Sr., who was just looking at his autobiography, Making My Mark, the story of a man who wouldn't stay in his place. He was a lawyer. He was a jurist. He became a member of the Atlanta City Council. Arrington from Atlanta as well. He went to Booker T. Washington. But at any rate, it just made me think about Arrington because he just made transition. Went to Howard Law School, then transferred to Emory. Was graduated from Clark College, now Clark Atlanta University. But Christine King Farris came back to the Atlanta University Center to shepherd those fresh people. And she said, since that time, Clark College and Atlanta University have merged to create Clark Atlanta University. Each school had an individual program administrator whose duties mirrored mine. And then she names all of them. And then she says, those assistants to all of these sisters, and they were all sisters who ran these programs, they allowed people like Christine Farris to go back to graduate school. So while her brother was at Crozier Theological Seminary and she was working at Spelman, she was also working ultimately on what became 2 master's degrees from Columbia University. And eventually the foundation money ended. And as it was phased out, she says, Spelman organized the Learning Resources Center as part of the Department of Education. I was appointed director and hold that position today because her book was published in 2008. She retired from Spelman, Professor Hunter and everyone. Willie Christine King Farris retired from Spelman College in 2014. In 2014.
Wow.
2014, Prof. That don't mean she retired from work. I'm standing, Professor Hunter. I'm standing in the sanctuary of what they call the Legacy Chapel, which was the only chapel at the time that she and her siblings came into that church, at Ebenezer Baptist Church, because, of course, her grandfather, A.D. Williams, who Christine King Farris saw draw his last breath when there was a noise in the house on Auburn Avenue, and her grandmother sent her into the room to check on her grandfather because he's supposed to be getting dressed, getting ready, and he's laying on the floor, gasping. And she said, I thought he was just taking a nap. He was dying. She saw her grandfather make transition. She lived through the killing of her brother, Martin Luther King. She lived through the drowning a couple years later of her other brother, A.D. Williams. She's sitting on the front row on the opposite side of the church where her mother is playing the Hammond organ when a man stood up and said, I'm taking over from here, and shot her mother to death as she's sitting next to her father in Ebenezer Baptist Church. This is Willie Christine King Farris. Now, I understand if a Kennedy sibling, or one day a Trump sibling, or about makes transition and the world stops, damn it, in the social structure, they're not going to recognize this sister. But right now, I'm telling y'all right now, if you are anywhere in the vicinity of Atlanta, next Tuesday, the 11th, there's going to be a reflection on her life and a celebration at the famous Sisters Chapel. Some people only know Sisters Chapel when you saw my now colleague, Dean Felicia Rashad, when in a different world, when she's in Sisters Chapel and they show her standing up there, you know. And of course, on Spelman's campus, there's still the building named for Hanks, Olivia Hanks. And of course, the Cosbys still there. They had the good sense to keep the money. At any rate, on Tuesday, July 11th, there's going to be a ritual. She's going to be lying in state from 4 to 5:45 p.m. at Sisters Chapel. At 6 p.m., they're going to be tributes that start. That's on the 11th on the campus of Spelman College. They're going to be final rituals from the Lynx and Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, because you know in our governance structure, them sisters got them organizations where you will get gathered. I'm sure there's a dress code. Respectability politics aside, I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, and I will never put on another tie. So if a ritual requires a tie, I'm just not going to be there because I have my own respectability politics. But guess what? I've never been excluded from an Omega ceremony by the Alphas when I showed up, whether it be Sam Yet or James Donaldson, whether it be Marion Barry. And when the Alphas get up to do that last ritual over your body, I got on my African clothes and ain't nobody say nothing. I sing the frat song, and our dear A-Phi-A, fraternal spirits bind. All the noble, the true and courageous, manly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind are the aims of our dear fraternity. Alpha Phi Alpha. Now, people are going to hear petty bourgeois. I'm first my family go to college. I have contempt for the Negro bourgeoisie, but I'm a member of a Greek letter organization. That second verse always gets me in my heart, because when you sing the song and they say, college days swiftly pass, imbued with memories fond, and the recollection slowly fades away in our dear A-Phi-A. You go on. But that line is very important. College days swiftly pass. Your youth swiftly pass, imbued with memories fond, and the recollection slowly fades away. What endures is the relationships. I went to Tennessee State. I pledged Beta Omicron. Tennessee State, 1985. I got 2 degrees from Ohio State, PhD from Temple. Don't mean nothing to me. That's social structure licensure. Lets me go in classrooms and operate. I have no place in my life for the respectability politics of academia. But I got the driver's license, because you need a driver's license to operate the motor vehicle. At the same time, those Greek letters don't mean anything to me. What those Greek letters connect me to is an unbroken genealogy. Charles Hamilton Houston, Duke Ellington, Paul Robeson, W.B. Du Bois, Martin Luther King. You come on down the road and through the line. And that allows me to do. Now, you talk to Jeremiah Wright. He's going to tell you the same thing, except his is going to come through Omega Psi Phi. He know that.
Cooper Coleman, Love and Just.
Come on now, you better come on. Watch out now. Whoa. See, you're gonna get, why you give me 5? See, this week, look, they set tripping in the chat. I already know. There's some people set tripping in here. I won't talk about these Kappas. Don't you do it. Don't you do it, Prof. We're gonna why this. I'm only mentioning it to say that ain't no such thing in my mind as a black Greek. Anybody call themselves a black Greek got some problems. You're a member of a Greek letter organization. And before anybody says, well, why you got it in Greek letters? Aren't we writing with the 26 character script that the Phoenicians jacked the Egyptians and some other people for and circulated around? And aren't we having this conversation in English? At what point do we decide that self-determination is going to have to make do with some of the things we came through in order to get to where we want to get? So if you're around on Tuesday, go by Sisters Chapel. They'll open the doors before 4 o'clock. I'm not quite sure when. And somebody's going to probably put this information in the chat. On Saturday, the 15th, they're going to have a ritual at the Heritage Sanctuary of Ebenezer Baptist Church. She'll be laying in state there from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So a week from this Saturday, she'll be there. her mortal remains from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And I was just in that chapel, sitting there having conversations with the Rangers of the National Park Service. I mean, it was just lovely to sit there and listen to these brothers and sisters, one young sister in particular, because after the news came, I went back over to the King Center, and the sister said, well, they haven't really firmed up plans yet, or we haven't anything heard from the family yet. They had a press conference on Friday, last Friday, with Isaac Ferris Jr., her son, and Bernice King, of course, her niece, talking about, her life. Very important, because she was a co-founder of the King Center. She and her sister-in-law were like sisters. Oh my God. Hearing her talk about and write about how they went to exhume the body of Martin King, had to move him twice. He was buried in the cemetery. Then they moved him over to a plot next to Ebenezer. And then, of course, the crypt where he is now with Coretta, his mortal remains. But she said, we went out to the cemetery that first time, 4 a.m. in the morning, about 2 o'clock in the morning. Why? Because they had already started shooting up the tombstones. These white boys out there, y'all know who they are. Some of y'all here right now, your children, I'm sorry, your ancestors, your parents, you MAGA people. And I don't mean MAGA like Trump. I mean MAGA like July 4th. Y'all just didn't like Martin Luther King because he's going to try to make you something that you're not. But the point is, they already started desecrating the grave. And so it was her. Imagine this, y'all. 4 a.m. in the morning. Coretta Scott King, her sister-in-law, Willie Christine, and a handful, 2 or 3 deacons from Ebenezer Baptist Church, AD, and I forget who else she said. Just I'm talking. It ain't a dozen people to exhume the body. Oh, Ralph Abernathy, of course, always. This whole thing with this whole thing with Janelle Monáe and NDRE and Don't Critique It. When Ralph Abernathy wrote and the walls came tumbling down, I'm pointing to it because I got a signed copy. I keep it up there. And he was talking about some of the things, and now Jonathan Igue is getting all this credit for saying, oh, Martin King had all these affairs. Abernathy took most of that stuff to the grave, but when he dared mention a few things in his autobiography, then they came for him. You think this little Essence beef is something? Imagine when all them cats that we now talk about, these leaders, were still alive, and then Abernathy said, because part of it was everywhere King was, Abernathy was. Every danger Martin Luther King faced, Ralph Abernathy faced. So here he is, his friend has been killed, his best friend, and he out there in the cemetery with his best friend's sister, his best friend's wife and brother, and they out there and a couple of deacons, and they are exhuming the body to move it, and then they move it over to where Ebenezer is. I'm saying these are the kind of stories and reflections that you have to think about. And so anyway, on the 15th, there will be a ritual at Ebenezer. 10 to 4, she'll be laying in state. And then they're going to have a Make a Joyful Noise musical tribute starting at 6 p.m. The young sister who works for the National Park Service, who was there at the entry of Ebenezer, and then I went upstairs into the vestibule and then into the sanctuary. She was telling me about, and this sister was in her 20s. This is one of the things that made it so refreshing, just listen to this young person. She talked about how Dr. Ferris, she's born in September, would have her birthday parties over there. Any of y'all ever, come on, some of y'all probably talking about this. No problem. We was wait, Janice Riley says her daughter would come and say, oh, mother, we got to go. No problem. We were talking in front of Dr. King and Miss Coretta King, 0-degree weather. No question. I was in college in my Black National Stage development, so I didn't play the sorority, but I still went to all their parties. No question, Miss Sankover. Well, don't get it wrong. I'm still a Black Nationalist. I was a Black Nationalist back then. I just went to the library and I didn't know nothing about none of the fraternities. And when all my friends wanted to be Sigmas, we was all in the marching band, another thing you played to get into. And we was in there looking at the books. And they was all crowded around the Sigma book. And I looked up on the shelf and said, let me see that one because it's got a Sphinx on it. And I was always thinking about Egypt, even then. And so at 18 years old, I started flipping through the book. And when I saw Du Bois and Paul Robeson and Martin Luther King and them, and I didn't know nothing about fraternities. And I said, wait, are these guys in all those other books? And they was like, no, you can only be in one. I said, well, why in the hell would you want to be in any of them? Dr. King in this book, Du Bois in this book, Paul Robeson and Duke Ellington are in it, Jesse Owens is in. This is the one I want to be in if I'm going to be in one. So I understand. For me, Black nationalism isn't just anchored in the rituals, the shrines, the totems, the signifiers in terms of cultural meaning making that we identify directly with Africa. They are also extensions of Africana. Our HBCUs are extensions of Africana. And then finally, so if you get a chance, pay your respects if you're in the Atlanta area. And then finally, on Sunday the 16th, they will have the actual ritual. The ritual will be at the big, what they call the Horizon Sanctuary, where Reverend Warnock preaches, Senator Warnock preaches. 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. she'll be laying in state. And at 5 p.m. on the 16th of June, the final rites and ritual for Willie Christine King Farris will be held at Ebenezer. She writes about when Raphael Warnock came as the pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church in her memoir, Through It All. I mean, there is so much in here. I could spend a lot more time talking about it, but I'm going to kind of wind this up for today. It's a reminder to kind of tie this together from where we started to now, that while we are, and I didn't even mention, but I had it out to mention, Darren Walker, president of the Ford Foundation, on the 4th of July, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, says, undoing affirmative action may not end here. And he starts talking about the value of affirmative action, what it meant to him, what it means to us, all of which is very important, but ultimately should not be our central thinking and work while we're pouring these clean glasses of water. It has to be building our institutions, whether it be continuing to pump time and resources and expand the capacity to have students at a place like Spelman, where Christine King Farris spent almost 50 years of her life on the faculty in which she graduated from, whether it be Narrative in Nubia, where we all contribute a little to creating a platform and a space that builds and it continues to grow exponentially, whether it be being in these spaces where people who are not yet in that space are able to come in and continue to think and connect and be instructed and inspired. And by instructed and inspired, I don't mean being taught what to do, but to be exposed. There are people today who may not have known much about Willie Christine King Farris and who know now. And all of that in the context of a place that is very uncertain about what it's going to be going forward. So I end today, and I say that because this was in the arts section of the New York Times on the 4th of July as well. This is hilarious. If you get messy before the cake is served, they talk about the 250th birthday of the United States and how they already fighting in the States on how to interpret what it means to be an American, what it means to be in the United States. And I'm not just talking about the attacks on Black studies. There's a new book that just came out. Our history has always been contraband, in defense of Black studies, Colin Kaepernick and my friends Robin Kelly and Keonda Yamada Taylor. It's a nice compendium of different pieces from the history of African people, Black Panthers, excerpts from the Black Panther Party, W.B. Du Bois, C.L.R. James, Fred Douglass, Angela Davis, Kimberly Crenshaw, Michelle Alexander. Very important. It's not Black studies the way I would define it. It certainly isn't. But it is a contribution to the ongoing work of trying to fight back. But I don't think fighting back should be at the center of our work. I think when we take the model of a Christine King Farris, resist, create. Her brother was killed, so she got with her sister-in-law, you might as well say, sister-in-law, some people may say, and they co-founded, along with a few others, the Martin Luther King Center for Social Change, the campus which still exists. You fight back. Your mother's killed, your brother dies. Your niece dies young, Yolanda King. It's a lot of tragedy around the King family, but that tragedy, Dr. Ferris did not stop, because we all have tragedy in our life. And as the old gospel song said, that awful day will surely come. And before it does, you do what you can in this space. So while we are fighting, while we're resisting, we don't define our field of study. And, Robin defines it as an interdisciplinary field. And I respect that. I acknowledge that. I also completely and utterly reject it. I utterly reject it as, in terms of Africana studies, as the way that we have to think about Africana studies. Otherwise, I went and got a PhD in history and philosophy and hid out in that space until somebody said all that Black stuff is bad, and then come back and says we're all doing Black studies. How do it free us? It free us by starting before all this and carrying it through all the way to the living moment, and then projecting forward like we're going to do on our panel at 1:00 on Afrofuturism. That's going to be a conversation we have. So affirmative action, important. Not nearly as important as institution building. arguing about how much or how little clothes we got on at a festival that other people have colonized and now using for their own profit, not nearly as important as connecting our Black bookstores and Black institutions to this conversation so that we continue to build instead of being distracted. So I'm gonna start with that.
Yeah. I mean, today, Oklahoma school board decided that they will teach the Tulsa massacre, but you can't say it was because of race or racism.
What was it? Did they say what it was because of?
This is crazy. It's okay to teach Oklahoma school children about the Tulsa massacre. You just can't tell them that it was motivated by the color of anyone's skin. The state superintendent of schools said at a forum yesterday. Ryan Walters, who was elected to the state's top education post in November, was mocked and lambasted by those in the meeting and in reports given online immediately afterwards. The conservative Republican was asked how teaching about a 1921 murder of hundreds, probably thousands, of Black citizens of Tulsa doesn't violate his ban on teaching what he calls critical race theory. His reply: I would never tell a kid that because of your race, because of the color of your skin or your gender or anything like that, you are less of a person or inherently racist. That doesn't mean you don't judge the actions of individuals. Oh, you can. Absolutely. Historically, you should. That's right. This is wrong. They did this for this reason. But to say it was inherent in that because of their skin is where I say that is critical race theory. You're saying that race defines a person. This is such
I love it. I love it. Because in that conversation you had with Mother Fresh and Uncle Red, I think he's saying what they said, right? I'm sorry, what was the name of her book? I'm trying to remember. What was the name?
Don't Bury My Story.
Exactly. So
she actually added the damn it. They took the damn it off.
She done told you when they come up with that, don't you let that man throw no dirt on my story. And you didn't. We pouring them clean glasses. They desperate.
Yeah. And I'm gonna be sitting with Bernice King next week.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, I cannot wait to hear that, because I'm telling you, you get a chance, and this is very.
I'm sitting here like the irony. I've been trying to talk with her for like 5 years. It's like, yeah. I mean, I have a list of people I want to talk with.
Of course.
And so she finally was like, yes, okay. So I'm gonna do a pre-tape with her next Thursday. Wow. And having this conversation with you is like magic. Thank you.
That's great. Next Thursday. So that'll be right between the tribute at Spelman, where she went to undergrad, of course, before she went off to go to law school, and the rituals that you'll be in the week when you that's watching her. If y'all go to the King Center website, and don't go anywhere, as I mentioned, look at the press conference. Only about an hour. Isaac Ferris Jr. rather, and Bernice, the cousins, talking about his mother, her auntie. I mean, so it is. I mean, you just see. I mean, imagine that. See, if these were Kennedys.
Yes.
The country would have stopped.
Yes.
You understand? Yeah. If you want to know who these people are, damn no individual.
Yeah, the country should stop because this is our royalty, right? And we
teach
we're gonna do it together, I promise. But as I'm reading about Christine, Miss Dr. Farris.
Yes.
She went to Spelman. Her mother went to Spelman. Her grandmother, who's born in 1800s, went to Spelman. And I'm like, you think about legacy, just like you being an alpha because of the legacy, like, again, that momentum of memory has to be entrenched in everything that we do. But I think about living in a family where there's that, you're the first to go to college. My dad was the first to go to college in his family. She's 3 generations. Somebody was born in the 1800s went to Spelman.
Come on.
And then she couldn't go to the school that she wanted to, so she went to Columbia.
Come on.
It's like, all right, Georgia, you don't want me? I'm going to Ivy League over here.
That's right. She said, in fact, if you don't mind, let's do one more time. I mean, look, let me put it on the big screen so everybody can see. Just right quick. Grandfather, A.D. Williams. Morehouse College. Wait a minute. These are family pictures, y'all. Here go her. Hold on. Give me 5 seconds here. Grandmother, Jenny Parks. That's the one sent her in there to check on her granddaddy. Her granddaddy, Morehouse. Wait a minute. Hold up. Her mother in the cap and gown. Spelman looking, Martin Luther King looked just like his mama, don't he? Here she is there with the family. Grandpa has made transition, but there she is living with them in the house on Auburn Avenue. There go Christine, the eldest, sitting in the middle between AD and Martin. in their short pants. Come on, y'all. We're gonna talk about Black family. Let's talk about Black family. And then finally, because you mentioned it, let me just go. Well, I'll start with here we go. Her daddy, Morehouse College, 1930. He had to work, he had to preach before he could go. In fact, who was it told the story? Lord have mercy. It might be in the Martin Luther King papers, volume 1, where even ML Senior goes to visit because he's sweet on Jenny Celeste and A.D. Williams' daughter, Alberta. So he coming to visit at the house. A.D. Williams looking like, who are you? Well, sir, I'm out of this rural place in Georgia. I'm trying to better myself. I'm going to school. Bruh, you don't cut no ice in this house. You had to work for it, which is why Martin Luther King said every minister in my bloodline came through my mama's family, except my daddy. And then, of course, here she is after her graduation day with her parents. And then, of course, the famous picture of her with her brother and her brother with her father on graduation day, 1948. 10 years later, she comes back to join the faculty. And she comes in 48 and don't leave in 14. And as they told me standing there in Ebenezer last week, she still taught. She said she would have a Christmas concert and bring all the choirs and the students from the AUC to come sing. Clark, Morehouse, Spelman, come over here singing this. This woman taught all the way through her life. A master. So yeah. Anyway, yes. So we can see each other in the Afro future.
Yes, I will see you in the Virginia streets. I'm looking forward to the food truck. I can't talk enough about the food trucks, all of the food trucks and the video game installations. Hope to play some kids in some Street Fighter. We'll see what's out there.
No way.
I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to, to have all of us together in one place, is also very special. I'm getting to meet Dr. Straight for the first time. But to have a conversation in a room full of people, again, of like minds who, care about the future, to even talk about the future of Black anything, but creativity. Yeah. We must tell our stories. We must write our narratives, and we must be centering our memories in everything that we do. So, and I thank you for all of this. Because now I got more work to do, but I'm here for it. I appreciate it.
Me too. You and Sunyata Amin in the same place. I don't think that hotel. We might have to have this session outside.
Yeah, I'm gonna be quiet. I'm just moderating. I'm just moving.
Hey y'all, Monday night in office hours, we're gonna check up on what we just heard Professor Hunter say. We're gonna see some of y'all over there, so Yeah.
And everyone, be safe as you pass along in the highways and byways. And Dr. Carr, I love you immensely. I will see you tomorrow.
See you.
Bye, everyone. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day.